This is the law that Jesus broke. It comes from Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 16. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord your God at the place that he will choose, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at the Feast of Weeks, and at the Feast of Booths. They shall not appear before the Lord empty-handed. Now the place the Lord shall choose was Jerusalem, where the temple was built, and that's where all male Israelites needed to go down to keep these 3 feasts. Of course, Jesus was a male Israelite, so if we can show from the Gospels that he did not go down to Jerusalem, that he remained in Galilee for at least one of these feasts, then it's clear that he broke the law of Moses. John's Gospel is actually organized around these 3 feasts. John uses the Greek word eorte, which means feast, 17 times in his Gospel, whereas the other 3 Gospels only use this word 7 times combined. In John chapter 6, in the very beginning of chapter 7, he makes multiple reference to feasts, and he gives us clear timestamps of where Jesus was at and what he was doing. These clear timestamps are going to show us that Jesus missed not just 1, but 2 of these feasts. So let's start in John chapter 6, verse 1. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him, because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. So the Passover kicked off the first of these 3 feasts, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And John tells us clearly that Jesus was in Galilee at this point. He doesn't say the Passover had happened, but he says that it's near. And if we follow chapter 6 carefully, we find that it covers just 2 days. The first of those days is in verses 1 through 22. Jesus feeds the 5,000, and then that night he walks on the water out to his disciples in the boat. The remainder of the chapter covers the very next day. Jesus is in the synagogue back in Capernaum, and he's delivering one of his most unpopular teachings about how he's the bread from heaven and his disciples need to eat his flesh. At this point, many of his disciples desert him. The 12 remain, Peter, James, John, and the others, but Jesus has a much smaller following at this point. And then immediately, the very next chapter, chapter 7, verse 1, we read this. After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He would not go about in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. So it explicitly says here that Jesus did not go down to Judea. But remember, in those 2 days, chapter 6, verse 4 told us that the feast of the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, was at hand or was near. So Jesus did not go down to keep this feast. And his brothers noticed that he did not go to keep the feast. So here's what happens next in chapter 7, verses 2 through 4. Now the Jews' Feast of Booths was at hand. So his brothers said to him, Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works that you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. So there's a 6-month period between the Feast of Passover and the Feast of Booths, which means Jesus missed the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and he missed the Feast of Weeks, which happens just 50 days later. So what I've presented in this video is a clear case that Jesus broke Deuteronomy 16:16. He did not go down to Jerusalem to keep these 2 feasts, even though he was a male Israelite, and that was commanded by the law. If this disturbs you, that Jesus broke the Mosaic law, I think you've misunderstood what the Bible means when it says that he fulfilled the law and the prophets. I go into that topic in much greater detail in this video. If you watch it, I think you'll come away with a much bigger idea of who Jesus was than you ever thought before.